For millions, worrying and waiting are the new normal.
The line between disinformation and misinformation is not always an easy one to find.
Governments need to be willing to do things that are out of their historical perspective, or for the most part, it's really a war footing that we need to be on.
It can happen quickly. A Marshall-type plan, don't mean to say that exactly, but a Marshall plan that can go into effect can stimulate a change very quickly.
The distrust relates to the health system more generally.
A step up from the part of the government on enforcement actions against fake news.
I think a couple of things we have to consider are, even before this began, the anti-vaccine movement was very strong, and this is something specifically through social media that has spread.
Welcome to Event 201.
Alarming news emerging from social media companies today about the CAPS pandemic. Twitter and Facebook are reporting they've identified and deleted a disturbing number of accounts dedicated to spreading disinformation about the outbreak.
These accounts were created by several state-sponsored groups intending to sow political discord, and some individuals are seemingly seeking to gain financial advantages. Violence against healthcare workers and minority populations has been increasing. A recent riot highlights the real danger in these posts. Countries are reacting in different ways as to how best to manage the overwhelming amounts of dis and misinformation circulating over the internet. In some cases, limited internet shutdowns are being implemented to quell panic.
To me, it is clear countries need to make strong efforts to manage both mis- and disinformation. We know social media companies are working around the clock to combat these disinformation campaigns. The task of identifying every bad actor is immense. And experts agree that new disinformation campaigns are being generated every day. This is a huge problem that's going to keep us from ending the pandemic and might even lead to the fall of governments, as we saw in the Arab Spring. If the solution means controlling and reducing access to information, I think it's the right choice.
I agree with Kevin. This is a big problem and doesn't even account for the massive amounts of misinformation being generated by legitimate users about the pandemic. But it's not just trolls who are spreading the fake news. It's often political leaders themselves. Who's to judge what's real or not? Would we trust every government to separate truth from lies?
I think this is more than just keeping the bad information out. It's also about making sure real public health information reaches the public. News is found from outlets other than social media. News organisations, public health groups and companies need to help people take the right actions to protect themselves by promoting accurate, real information about the outbreak.
Health experts have highlighted that dis and misinformation are wreaking havoc on the CAPS response. Health workers are under attack in a number of locations due to rumors that they are purposely spreading the disease. And response efforts in many places have had to be suspended because of concerns around violence. Pharmaceutical companies are being accused of introducing the CAPS virus so they can make money on drugs and vaccines, and have seen public faith in their products plummet. Unrest due to false rumors and divisive messaging is rising and is exacerbating spread of the disease as levels of trust fall and people stop cooperating with response efforts. This is a massive problem, one that threatens governments and trusted institutions. Polls have shown that mis- and disinformation are ubiquitous. At least 90% of the public has been exposed to these messages. We know that social media is now the primary way that many people get their news. So interruptions to these platforms could curb the spread of misinformation, but could also limit access to information from legitimate sources. Health ministries around the world are attempting to combat mis- and disinformation by amplifying public health messaging through social and traditional media. But they are being outpaced by false and misleading information. National governments are considering or have already implemented a range of interventions to combat misinformation. Some governments have taken control of national access to the internet. Others are censoring websites and social media content. And a small number have shut down internet access completely to prevent the spread of misinformation. Penalties have been put in place for spreading harmful falsehoods, including arrests. Other countries have taken a more moderate approach and have focused on promoting fact-checking efforts and working with traditional media outlets, yet these approaches are limited in scope. Social media companies report that they're doing all they can to limit the use of their platforms for nefarious or misleading purposes. But this is a technically difficult problem, and false, misleading, or half-true information is difficult to sort without limiting potentially true messages. The bottom line is that members of the public no longer know who to trust. Both the misinformation and the measures to control it have led to a crisis of confidence.
There is work that's being done to actually create algorithms to sift through information on these kind of social media platforms. Gates Foundation and others are funding organisations to work on things like this.
With the social media platforms, there's an opportunity to understand who it is that's susceptible in what form to misinformation. So I think there's an opportunity to collect data from that communication mechanism. With that ability, we can identify false information more quickly. We are actually receiving reports about people trying treatments that are purported to be effective but are actually harmful. And the quicker that's recognized and can be countered, the fewer people will fall susceptible to those things.
About incentivizing the kind of behaviours we want to see. It's not just about handing people a piece of knowledge. It's also about how we incentivize them to manage their behaviours, which
a step up from the part of the governments on enforcement actions against fake news, right? Some of us, these new regulations that come in place about how we deal with fake news, and maybe this is a time for us to showcase some cases where we are able to bring forward some bad actors and leave it before the courts to decide whether they have actually spread some fake news.
So governments in the private sector should assign a greater priority to developing methods to combat mis and disinformation. For their part, media companies, we believe, should commit to ensuring that authoritative messages are prioritized and really false messages are suppressed.
The anti-vaccine movement that's going forward right now, and there was going to be a community event tomorrow in New York City that actually ended up being canceled yesterday because it was only anti-vaccine advocates as a part of a community event, and nobody from the professional medical community would join even in the conversation. So the organizers ultimately, because they were shamed, canceled the event. But it does call out that that's a real issue at the moment.
If it really were catastrophic, I don't know if we're prepared for the civil unrest, including military. Are they ready for such civil unrest if it were really to get out of hand?
Friends, Aaron here. I'm just going to talk a little bit about this idea of misinformation. We got to stop using these words. This is the propaganda that we're relentlessly bombarded with if we choose to be bombarded by it. And make no mistake, you don't have to be bombarded by it. I'm going to share something with you that has nothing to do with what I'm about to talk about specifically, but it's just an idea to give you an idea of some of the really stupid information that's out there from trusted sources. And there's a lot of it. And then I'm going to get into what I want to talk about, which of course relates to our state of emergency. Read an article from WebMD, which if you look at the link on the search results, it says, what you eat can give you kidney stones, what foods to avoid. They tell you what a kidney stone is. So they're going to tell you high oxalate foods. Many plants contain oxalate, so it's hard to avoid it entirely. They're not talking about whether or not you've had kidney stones. They're giving you the impression that you should avoid high oxalate foods as much as possible. Some foods have much more than others. Try to limit the following foods: spinach, rhubarb, almonds, and cashews. Baked potatoes with the skin. The skin's actually very good for you in the potato, by the way. If we make mashed potatoes, we leave the skins on. Beets, cocoa powder, which actually has some real health benefits. Okra, raspberries, sweet potatoes. Read into the actual health benefits of spinach, rhubarb, almonds, cashews, beets, okra, raspberries, and sweet potatoes. Foods to avoid. There's some good information from a trusted source from WebMD. So, here we go again, being inundated with this propaganda BS about bad information. Keep watching TV. Keep watching TV. Keep drinking your fluoridated water. Keep leaving your wireless on all the time. Keep putting on your deodorant with aluminum in it. Keep drinking out of your plastic bottles and sucking in plastic particles. Keep getting your flu shot. Keep doing all the things that they tell you to do, your trusted sources, and ruin your brain so that you can't even think. That's part of what this is all about. I can remember so many times when we've been told, this is bad, this is good, this is bad again, this is good, this is bad, this is good again. Hey, people who lean this way on the political spectrum think this way. Well, now, people who lean this way on the political spectrum lean this way. There's all sorts of doublespeak and all sorts of just flat-out lies. Flat-out lies. What I just read to you is a flat-out lie. You should not limit your intake of the foods that I just read to you. Go ahead and go get yourself packages of processed food sitting in aluminum cans filled with estrogen. Go do that. Go eat foods full of polysorbate 80. Go do that. And monosodium glutamate. Go eat all of that processed crap that isn't even food. Go eat that. That's okay. But don't eat this stuff that the Father made that's full of things you need. Don't do that. Trusted source, WebMD. So I'm going to share a video with you, some parts of a video. This one was out of Germany. Somebody talking about misinformation. I'm just going to kind of talk about a little bit about what he says. And then I'm going to read a couple things to you, because I'm going to put this video in, these little clips from the video somewhere in here. I don't know where. But this video that I'm going to share, the segment that goes into talking about the misinformation, they start off by saying they're ending their last segment and they're beginning this segment about misinformation, and they're saying, for millions, worrying and waiting are the new norm. If you don't understand that they're telling you what to think, and that they're telling you that worrying, fearfully waiting, that's normal. That's the new norm. Telling you what to think. There was a subtle change that I noticed before I stopped paying attention to anything in sports, because I was going that way. I'm not going to watch the Super Bowl. I grew up in Buffalo, New York. I don't mind telling you. I watched the Bills lose 4 straight Super Bowls. I used to think, man, it'd be exciting if they go back to the Super Bowl. If they go back to the Super Bowl, I don't care. And I'm not watching. But before I stopped reading sports articles, I got to tell you that I noticed a real distinct change in the sports articles. Subtle at first, and then really kind of more noticeable. They tell you in the article what you should think about what they're telling you. Whatever news it is, whatever somebody did, whatever story it is, it's just an article about somebody kicked somebody in the groin in a basketball game, and this is what you should think about that. They tell you what to think. For millions, worrying and waiting are the new norm. Goes on to talk about the reason why all this misinformation is out there about the Wuhan virus is to sow confusion, foment fear, and hatred, really. And goes on to talk about how conspiracy theorists are racist against Chinese people. That's what he goes on to talk about. And that it makes everything much worse. Makes it a situation that's already scary, just way worse. We're all more afraid of it because of this misinformation that's being put out there. Also goes on to talk about how it sows distrust in your government. that we need to trust because they're just trying to help us all. Yep. They also talk about how it's really focused on and perpetuated by the anti-vaxxers who believe somehow, that vaccines could be bad for your health. Somehow $4 billion paid out for vaccine damage. Watch the last video I made about the coronavirus and listen at the end to the things that I read to you about our immune response to the pathogens in a virus compared to us being exposed to those pathogens naturally. Read that. Take some time and actually look into the ingredients that are in the vaccines. Understand that these toxins, in trace amounts, whatever they may be, and there's lots of different toxins in there. We're not just talking about the ones that everybody talks about. There's lots of toxic junk in there. Lots of stuff that's foreign to you, that's bad for you. Your body doesn't grab hold of it and eliminate it, and it builds up in your body. There are so many things that people are ignorant to. Doctors are ignorant to. Ibuprofen's safe. It's safe, 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 safe. Ibuprofen builds up in your body. You don't get rid of it. Keep popping ibuprofen pills. It's just one pill here, one pill there, 10 pills there. Add it up in your whole life, it's thousands. And it's still in there. And it's doing you harm. These things accumulate in our system and they do us harm. And we're not eating properly. We're filling ourselves full of toxins. We're overwhelming our immune system. We're overwhelming our liver. We're shutting down our normal function. We're not eating the foods and doing the things that detoxify our bodies. And that's why we're sick. That's why we're sick. Ah, man. I'll probably share those clips now. And then I'm going to read a couple other things to you.
I mean, we have these incorrect claims spreading on social media.
We're seeing a pattern that unfortunately has become all too familiar in situations like these. We're seeing, false and misleading information that's kind of sprinkled with conspiracy theories. They're being spread to tens of thousands, if not millions of people on social media. It's to sow confusion and to foment fear and cement hatred, really. They're perpetuating this racist stereotype. That's, especially here in the Western world, is still pretty widespread, that because they eat different things, they're somehow dirty, and so if they carry this virus, it's basically their own fault. And one claim is just that things are much worse. We see these also quite often, so really blowing up the numbers, hundreds of thousands dead, millions infected. Obviously, we know, at least right now it's not. One claim in particular that's picked up steam has been fueled by that a patent had been filed in 2015 for the coronavirus. It is true that a patent was filed in 2015, but it was for a different strain of coronavirus, and it filed to try to develop a vaccine, combat this avian coronavirus. That's not what we're looking at here, presumably. Despite these claims being patently false, we are seeing them spread by tens of thousands, particularly the so-called anti-vaxxers, so people who believe that vaccines are somehow bad for your health. They're picking up on this conspiracy theory to say, well, it's the government that's behind it. They created the virus to basically as a plot to force people to get vaccinated. It's part of a broader pattern that is to sow mistrust in government. Don't trust everything you see online. That is true always. Tech giants, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube are trying to guide users to more reliable sources of information. At the end of the day, though, I think this really emphasizes again that a lot of this false information is still making it through, and they can really, in situations like this, help make a health scare even scarier. Don't trust everything you see online. That is true always.
First of all, I'm going to read nonsense. This is from CBS Live Updates. The headline: one American evacuated from China, one of these people that was on that first flight that left Wuhan. They went to Alaska, they screened them, and then they sent them down to Ontario, California. One of the 195 Americans evacuated from Wuhan, China, was placed under mandatory quarantine after trying to leave the facility where evacuees were supposed to stay for 72 hours of voluntary monitoring. Have you destroyed your brain so much that you can read that and not see that it's absolute nonsense? The evacuee was given the order on Wednesday night, just hours after arriving at California's March Air Reserve Base on a government-chartered flight. A spokesperson from the base told writers that the evacuee is complying with the order voluntarily and will stay on the base for 14 days. Now, I'm going to tell you that I screenshotted this, and it's changed since I screenshotted it. He's going to stay on the base voluntarily. Now it just says stay on the base for 14 days, but it said voluntarily. I screenshotted it. One of 195 Americans evacuated from Wuhan, China, was placed under mandatory, that's not voluntary, mandatory quarantine after trying to leave the facility where the evacuees were supposed to stay for 72 hours of voluntary monitoring. We just went up and down and back and forth. Now he's agreed to stay for 2 weeks of voluntary quarantine. There's your trusted news source, folks. There's your trusted source. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to other people. Don't listen to the people sharing good information. Listen to that. Then I just wanted to touch base on this one here. Facebook says it's trying to limit virus misinformation. Thanks, Facebook. Facebook said Friday that it was working to limit the spread of misinformation and harmful content about the coronavirus. Harmful content. Harmful content. If I share with you an article from a scientific magazine from 2015 telling you that researchers at the University of North Carolina were piecing together virus from SARS and Chinese bat coronavirus, hey, that's harmful. If we share information, if anybody's sharing information with you about how your trusted sources really shouldn't be trusted, yeah, of course, that's harmful content. Facebook has a head of health. Said in a blog post that the social media company's fact checkers, fact checkers, like the fact checkers at WebMD who tell you, don't eat rhubarb. You should really watch out for spinach. Don't eat sweet potatoes and raspberries because it's bad for you. Fact checkers were reviewing content and debunking false claims reported to the coronavirus. Facebook is also removing content with false claims or conspiracy theories that have been flagged by global health organizations and local health authorities, particularly focusing on claims designed to discourage treatment or taking appropriate precautions. Appropriate precautions don't live in fear. Appropriate precautions do what you can to initiate your body's whole immune response if you're exposed to something like this or you have to get vaccinated. There's some appropriate precautions. Discouraging treatment. Don't get the vaccine. My video is harmful content. The company has struggled to contain the spread of propaganda and hoaxes. Some false posts about the outbreak remain on the social media network despite being flagged as fake by outside fact-checking organizations. Who are you going to trust? Who are you going to believe?
Don't trust everything you see online. That is true always.